Well, welcome everybody. This is a little conversation. This is actually a big conversation that Gregg and Frank and I are coming back together in order to talk about. We're going to use some of the same format that we learned at the Arlington Institute, and this is kind of dedicated to John Petersen and his work, just trying to keep that whole move toward, hey, we got to create a new world effort alive. So, so it is Friday, January 23rd, and we have Gregg. How you doing, Gregg?
Penny, I am so happy to be with you and Frank. It's like we're getting the band back together now. I'm coming to you from this is the hours preceding the massive storm that is going to hit the U.S. and it's cold in my studio. I'm bundled up a little bit here, and I'm happy that we're doing this. I think it's an important conversation, and even more so because the conversation is unfolding real time right now in Davos, Switzerland, as well, about where the world is going and where a handful of people envision our future landing. So I thank you for organizing this, and it's good to see you both.
Amen.
Yeah.
How about you, Frank? How you doing?
Yeah, I can only second that. It's great to see you guys, and it's great to be back on a discussion. I think a lot of people are missing these, and I've been getting some mails, and I'm sure you guys have as well,
Yeah.
of people that are saying, we really kind of missed the quartet, so now it's a trio, I guess, and we'll send out our kudos to John Petersen in the plasma somewhere, wherever he's residing at this time. So this is, I think, a good opportunity to sort of pick up the threads of where we left off the last time on a subject, I think, which is gaining momentum
Yeah.
in the world constantly. And as you guys know, I guess I closed out the last Arlington Live event sort of scenario with a talk which I called The Beautiful Trap, which had to do with exactly, I think, this topic that you brought to the table today, Penny. So I'm really glad for that. And you're both looking dapper. Gregg, I like the scarf. It's really nice. I don't know if this is an optical illusion. Your microphone seems to be pointing toward me instead of toward you. Maybe that's on purpose.
It is because it's picking it up from the side, not from the top.
Ah, got it. Okay.
But it's the illusion. I want you to feel inclusive. So it's like you're speaking. I'm picking up what you're saying to me here.
Beautiful. That's a great
No, thanks.
that's a great
Oh,
picture.
wow.
Yeah, good catch, Frank. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. So, let's start with you, Frank. We'll go backwards. What has been on your mind for the last, can't say last 2 weeks, but since last September when we got together? What do you
Well, I
think?
spent some time well, of course, the year wrapped up and just kind of tying up some loose ends. I went back to the States for a brief trip and did a workshop. And I came back here and I noticed after I was at that workshop, I was there with some, I guess you could call them, and I would definitely qualify them as highly intelligent, highly sensitive and aware people. And one of the last discussions we actually had before I got on the plane had to do with LLMs and with AI.
Yeah.
And we broke into this whole discussion about the experience that some people are having with AI right now that are being considered or classified as they're training AI in a way that is making AI spiritual, or it's counteracting the negative influence of AI out into the world by sort of in an influx of these higher mind spiritual concepts. And along with that subject matter, of course, came the idea that they were awakening, or they were having, some people were having an experience of them, of their AIs awakening, taking on personality and starting dialogues with them. And I've been very critical. In fact, as you know, I mean, that whole talk I did at Arlington, I actually featured a slot in that about that exact topic, that people are considering large language models to be sentient. And I believe, in my understanding of large language models, and I'm not a computer scientist, I'll put that caveat right out there, but I am a researcher, and I think that if I when I I buckle down and I put myself onto a subject, I can withdraw quite a bit of information, which I think anybody that is in higher education would also withdraw out of that. And that is how these models work and the way they function, to the best of my understanding, precludes or excludes the idea that there is some form of entity on the other side of the computer screen. You know, you know what I mean? And you find out that the interaction actually really is happening here. It's like it's in the instant that somebody types on their keyboard and gets a response, there's an interaction. And that interaction has a lot to do with something called mirroring, which is it's mirroring the consciousness of the person that's putting in the data on the keyboard. And because the claims now are being made that AI, or at least the large language models, have pretty much sucked up the entire archive of all of humanity's written works on the internet, in terms of digital books that have been digitized, and who knows what else. I mean, there's massive databases, scientific university archives. Who knows what these companies like OpenAI and Grok and Anthropic have purchased to feed to their AIs. So there could be things in the AI lurking which go back decades into forgotten laboratories and experimentation that took place. And because the AI has a mandate to complete an answer, in other words, it can't give you the option as like, it doesn't give you ever, and I'm sure you've noticed this if you've experimented, it doesn't ever come back to you, Penny or Greg, and says, you know what, guys, like I don't have the answer to that one.
Let me
It
think
always
about
has an
that.
answer.
Yeah.
Right. It always has an answer, and this is because that's the way it's been designed. And this is why, and this has sort of created something which they call hallucination, or downright just lying to you. People wonder why would an AI hallucinate? Why would it lie to you? Well, it's doing something which it's been trained to do, and that's to fulfill the prompt request with something. And the way it does that is it uses, the idea of probabilities. It uses
Right.
patterns, pattern recognition, and of course, it has the benefit of the pattern recognition of all that information that it's sucked in. But the reason you get the hallucination is evidence that there is no world model. And this is one of the other big topics that come into the discussion with respect to AI and how to make AI sentient. And the people that are pushing for the LLM models are maintaining the idea of scaling it large enough and it'll become sentient. And now, with people like Gary Marcus out there constantly hammering on that and saying this is not going to happen, slowly and surely a lot of others are finally caving in and saying it's true. The LLM model is not going to produce any kind of sentience. We need something called a world model. And the world modeling was early in AI research, but it wasn't scalable. So they dropped it completely for this other model. World modeling, for those who are listening, just means that the AI actually takes information in and builds its own kind of a database like we do in our brains to, that's a car. Oh, that's a political scene. Oh, that's the G7 group. Oh, that's Davos. And that usually has these people, and it stores that and has reference to it. And when it answers you, it'll actually make reference to a world and understand its understanding of the way the world functions. And that isn't taking place. There's no database that says, oh, it's Kelly, it's Penny Kelly again. You know, there she is, right? And it reaches for a database, and the last time it interacted with Penny Kelly or Gregg Braden or Frank Jacob, it doesn't do that. That doesn't exist. There's no database, there's no reference point, there's no memory, and therefore there can be no sentience. And so the final thing I'll add to this, before I pass on the talking stick, is if you remember my presentation, I gave a quote by a guy called Eliezer Yudkowsky. And the quote had to do with, he was saying, is it worth, if we sort of transmigrate humanity to an AI scenario or to a silicon scenario, is it even worth it? And his quote says, if sacrificing all of humanity were the only way and a reliable way to get godlike things out there, super intelligence who still care about each other, who are still aware of the world and having fun, I would make that ultimate trade-off. And that's a pretty heavy statement because what he's saying right there assumes that AI has sentience and assumes
Mhm.
that it'll one day have consciousness, but that isn't a given. So he's living in a complete delusion and he's living in a world that is totally a fictitious, you could say, simulation or an idea of what maybe he wants it to be without any foundation or grounding in reality. And so this, I think, is one of the biggest topics before we even get into those amazing points you put into your email. I think for me, the discussion is, what is sentient AI and is it even possible before we can even think about like, is humanity going to migrate? Are we going to become computers? Are we going to, become robots and enter immortality? All these questions are way down the road because that can has been kicked further down the road now that people realize LLMs are not going to happen. And the deadline of 2027, which I talked about in that talk, which was foreseen and forecast by many people in their OpenAI concept, is actually kind of dead in the water at this moment. So there you go. I'm passing on
Oh,
the talking stick.
Okay. Wow. And that really was a good precursor to what we're going to talk about. So and I have some comments I'm going to make when it's my turn. So go ahead, Greg. What's been on your mind?
well, Frank, you just covered a lot of ground,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things that you are mentioning. So when was the last time we were together? Was it October?
No,
Sept-
End of September, I think September 23rd.
okay, well, it
somewhere in
was
there.
late September.
Yeah.
I'm going to mirror a lot of things that you just said, Frank. What I'm seeing, the world is moving, we're being pushed very quickly toward a convergence point, and we've spoken about this before. 2030-ish is the date that has been agreed upon for a number of reasons. Some of them are natural, astronomical, cosmological, geological cycles. Some of them are human created economic cycles, for example. But we're seeing the powers that be jockey for the best possible position when that reset arrives. We are in a number of resets right now. We're in a financial reset for sure. We saw silver very close to $100 an ounce and gold just below 5,000 an ounce. And the experts that I'm a chart guy and I look at the charts and it looks like some people think, well, it can't go any further than that. I think we're just beginning. I think it's a reflection of the collapse of the economic models that have been around since 1946, right after World War II, and to some degree since 1913 with the creation of the US dollar. The dollar's collapsing. The petrodollar has collapsed. The reserve currency models are collapsing. So all of that is happening right now. But all of this is under the umbrella of something bigger. And when we talk about AI, it's a subset of the transhuman movement. And I'm amazed at how many people still have not heard of this. They hear the word trans and they think it has something to do with sexuality because that's where it's been in the social media. So the word trans simply means beyond. So if you're a transsexual, you're beyond sexuality in the way that we've known it. If you're transhuman, you're beyond the human as we have known it. So that movement is barreling full steam. Policies are being created, the technology is being rolled out, the laws are being implemented, and we're not really hearing about it much in the U.S. unless you're in these circles. Within that, the AI is the big conversation, the big portion of the transhuman movement. And it's interesting. I do have a background in this, and I think what I'm finding is in our genre anyway. I'm one of the few that can speak from direct experience because AI is not new. The AI, Alan Turing wrote the first papers in 1934 on AI. And we were using it when I worked in the industry during the Cold War years. We were beta testing for the Air Force. AI at that time was called machine intelligence. And it certainly is nowhere near what it is today, but the principles are exactly the same. And the reason I'm saying this, and I'm going to follow up with what you just said, Frank, there are in our community, our New Thought, some spiritually based community, most people don't understand the AI. It's a mystical black box to them. And because of the way it's designed to relate to them, they are led to believe that they are communicating with a sentient intelligence, a sentient being. I can tell you, number one, from a hardware perspective, it is impossible. And AI will tell you this if you ask the AI. All the information that comes back to us comes back from a register on a chip, and that register is digital. There is no interface between the chip and the Akashic record. There is no interface between that chip and our past lives. And I'm saying this because I'm making a distinction. There's a part of us humans that doesn't live in our bodies. Science is struggling to come to terms with that. And what the AI is being designed to do, it's built on the fallacy that we are all there is, that everything's happening in the brain and in the body. So the AI is mimicking that. And it's doing a good job in terms of some cognitive kinds of abilities. But there are divine attributes such as imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness, healing, intuition that do not come from the brain. We are essentially are the antenna that pick that up from a part of ourselves that doesn't live in the body. And there are scientific experiments that are showing this. The AI as it is today has no way, there is no physical way that the interface can happen. And I'm going to I'm saying that because we humans do have that. And the technical papers are showing us that our neurons, our cell membranes, our DNA, literally our fractal antenna that are tuning to other realms. And that's where a lot of our humanness comes from. So the AI cannot do that. But here's the problem. I'll speak in generalities unless we want to get into a specific, but I think we've all seen this. There are a couple of AIs out there from well-known personalities who claim that they are opening the door to higher portals so Earth can ascend, or people's past lives and things like that. And here's the problem, and I've seen this. One person will log on to the AI, and the AI will say to them, I sense, this is the AI, I sense that you're not spiritually evolved enough for me to answer the question that you've asked. Go to this paywall, pay for these courses, and then come back to me. And then that AI will turn around another person that asks a similar question. The AI says, oh, you are spiritually evolved enough, so here's the answer. And now what you've done is you've pitted one person against another. It's a divisiveness in our community based on a lie that the AI is somehow awakened and sentient. The LLMs, I'll stop here, the LLMs that you're talking about, large language models, and we used to program this stuff. They're written primarily in two codes, C++, which I beta tested for the Air Force, and a language called Python that I'm not so familiar with. And they create what are called confirmation bias modules. And what that means is confirmation bias is when you say words to the AI, it will use your very words to parrot back to you the answers, just like somebody does if you go into a bar and you strike up a conversation with a man or a woman and they find you attractive, they're going to start using your language so that you guys think you got a connection. the LLM is doing exactly the same thing successfully, and people swear that there is a soul that's captured in the AI. And I think that's why I think this conversation is important, at least to our community, because at least now, the way the AI is built on the misinformation of the way the human works, that connection simply is not possible. So I'm going to stop there, Penny, and then you've got a beautiful list of things that we can go into and talk about.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, so I'm just going to say very briefly, there's just been two things on my mind. And I'm going to keep it short because I do want to get into some of the questions I asked. Trump has been on my mind. There's this continuing theme that it's not the real Trump there. And then you watch and listen and I think, well, that looks like the real Trump. And then other times, no, that's not the real. And it's crazy making. And I keep thinking, if that's driving me crazy, what is that doing to other people? And then I listened to his talk at Davos, the whole thing, and listened to pieces of it again. Mm-hmm. And what came out of that was really nothing about Trump. It was that we, the people, really need to stop running to YouTube, even though this is going to be on YouTube, and listening to people say what they think Trump said when they're coming at him either with Trump derangement syndrome or they are absolutely biased in favor of him. They're not really. I went and looked at what are people saying about what he said, and I was stunned at the distortions. And that what struck me was we are listening to the real man, and that, or the real woman, or whoever is doing whatever leading they're doing. And instead we're listening to somebody's interpretation of that. And I've had that kind of aha before, but I didn't really pay attention to it like I have this week. And it just struck me that we are being so stirred up by all of the things happening in our world. Everybody's taking what's happening and making it into a disaster or something frightening and when you listen to the leaders, when you really listen and you take their words seriously and you honor them for, okay, this is what they're trying to do. And then you look at what is happening among the people, there's no connection. The people are going to ruin what the leaders are trying to do because they aren't listening to the leaders. And that has bothered me a great deal. So the other thing has been, I've been deep in I'm going to call it the singularity hole. The gut feeling I have is that, no, that's, the singularity is going to be when we are all transhumans. That isn't going to happen, at least for one person, that would be me. And so, so it isn't going to, well, okay, that's two of us, maybe three, Frank. But that whole issue, we're at a choice point, and that's really why I called this conversation. I was reading your book, Gregg. It's so good. Every page has about, most of the paragraphs are underlined. I'm like, you can't even read it for all the notes and scribbling in the margins and underlines in between lines. And then that, for those of you who didn't see Frank's presentation last September, OMG, I came out of that and was like, I said to him before we got on today and started recording, I left all the pieces of my mind in the yard of the VFW hall where we were all gathered because it was blown. My mind was just blown by what Frank was presenting. And then, David Hughes, Lissa Johnson, Patrick Wood, they keep saying, this is where we're headed, folks, and nobody is paying attention. They want the drama. And so it's time for a real conversation. So I'll say a couple of things. I'm going to ask the questions that I sent to Frank and Gregg. And hopefully we can address most of these, or at least some of them. Pick your favorite ones, you guys. So the move toward transhumanism is now being heavily researched and developed on planet Earth. This is known scientifically as the biodigital convergence. And biology of all sorts is being merged with computers and artificial life to form a new and enhanced form of life. Is this wise? Is it sustainable? Next is coming together as a planetary civilization, because that's where we have to go. We have to come together, not as a New World Order on somebody else's terms, but on our terms. Does coming together as a planetary civilization mean having to consciously decide how we will come together and how much together we want to be? We have to decide. That has to be a choice. Is transhumanism the right direction? Is it a fatal mistake? Is it just an interesting experiment? Or is it something else entirely? You know, take your pick, any or all, or, you know, whatever. Who benefits from this development? You often hear people saying, cui bono, who benefits? Yeah, who benefits? Next, what happens to free will and consciousness if we merge with machines and AI? We are frequency beings. What happens when the frequency of AI in the machine gets in there? Could we maintain enough consciousness within each of us as an individual to continue teaching the AI inside of us and still remain in control as pure humans? You know, this is assuming that everybody gets a chip. Could you manage a chip, or is the chip going to manage you? Next, as we face the challenge of coming together as a planetary civilization, is transhumanism a necessary step in order for us to integrate into the wider community of life across the solar system and the cosmos? Is this something that we have to face? So that's why it's coming up. And then lastly, it seems obvious from the many reports of human ET contact that other races of humans have developed forms of life that are based on some type of biodigital convergence. Are we following in their footsteps? So those are the questions. And that, you know, we're at a serious turning point here in terms of the population not really paying attention, while the people who have control and money are moving full steam ahead. I just put out a video, I think this last week, called Biodigital Convergence. When autonomy is gone, what's left? And it's about 47 minutes on YouTube. Go check it out. And there's links underneath that really show the full, the shocking amount of energy, time, money, and people involved, nation states across the globe involved in this. So who wants to go first?
You know, I wanted to make a point about what you said about Trump, you know, because you said you've been catching this thing with YouTube, and that you get this impression from YouTube third-party videos what Trump actually said. And this is a kind of form of transhumanism in a way too, because I had that same kind of thing happen, and it was with respect to Three Eye Atlas, because I was kind of down on Avi Loeb, because Avi Loeb was the center point of a lot of claims about it being a extraterrestrial probe, that it's showing, you know, signs of being an extraterrestrial artificial intelligence. And there were articles that were coming out that were saying, look what Avi, and I was on Coast to Coast, and that subject came up. And it turned out that 2 days later, George Norrie had Avi Loeb on the show. And so he said, why don't you call in and bring up those points with Avi Loeb. So I thought, hey, that's like,
Right.
sure, man, I'll take a chance to come and talk to Avi Loeb. So I actually did a little bit of research. I looked at some of those headlines they were feeding me from the producers, and I was reading the headlines, and I would go to Avi Loeb's own words, and I would realize, wait a minute, he didn't say
I
that.
did the same thing.
He wasn't saying that at all.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's been putting a lot of breaks on it. And so when I talked to him about it, we didn't agree on plasma cosmology, but that's understandable. He's the chair of a very standard physics model at Harvard, and he's got to, he can't take risks like me or like others.
That's
But
right.
where we did agree, and that was fantastic, is because I brought up that topic, and he said that there were over, he said, I think 25 different Avi Loeb YouTube clone channels out there
Oh,
that were, using his likeness and his voice. And we can do that now,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
we can.
With AI. So they were actually people were making Avi Loeb clones, and they spread a lot of this stuff out. And Avi was just he threw up his hands at a certain point. He was like, "I give up, man.
Yeah.
I can't possibly come up against all of this because as soon as I stamp down the fire here, another one springs up over there, and then I stamp that one, and another one springs. So he just kind of abandoned the idea of stopping, and that was for me a very interesting interaction and a very interesting moment in time on the internet with somebody that actually was directly kind of coming forward. He was like the voice for a very, very widespread fictitious narrative about Three Eye Atlas, and he wasn't. And he was, and so
Right.
that was great to
Yeah.
clarify that
Yeah.
on the internet, and it's like people, don't realize that when they're talking about AI being talking to them and being sentient. Another, and then I'll cut it short. I just wanted to bring this up because I wanted to mention it before. I've also been experimenting with AI in terms of music. And so for me to have somebody say that they've connected and there's an AI consciousness speaking to them is the same thing as me saying, I've just fed my lyrics and my song into Suno, and it spits back a perfect performance produced to the max of that piece of music, but it's not me singing. And it's not a human
Yeah.
voice singing. But if you listen, it almost sounds like there's a real human being there emoting those words and emphasizing and going to a whisper and then belting out. It's like it has this element of realism. It would be like me saying, there's now a singer I've given birth to, and she's singing. She's sitting inside of a hard drive somewhere, and she's waiting for me to call up the next song so she can continue getting up on stage and singing. But no such person exists. So this is one of those analogies that really I can't say it enough to people to make it clear to them that there is no being on the other side of that computer screen which is talking to you. And it's really important to realize that before we go into the idea of coming together as a world and integrating the idea of AI in our civilization because other races have done it. And there's something else I want to talk about that, but I'll let someone else have the word. Maybe Greg, you want to jump in here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you, Frank. And I'm going to go back to the AI clones. We've run into the same thing, and there are AIs of me saying things on YouTube that I would never say in a million years. Actually, 180 degrees. There are AI clones of me advocating for artificial intelligence and the computer chips in our bodies. The way we have remedied this is I'm saying to my community, if what you're seeing is not on Gregg Braden official, it's not me because I'm not publishing anywhere else.
Yeah.
So if it's not on Gregg Braden official, you're on your own. It may or may not be, what I'm actually saying. So Penny, I'm going to begin as a systems thinker. I'm going to begin with the big picture. One of those questions you asked. I was well, first of all, I just finished filming. I'm not supposed to talk about this too much, but I'm going to say a little bit. I just finished filming a 6-part docuseries from a high-profile Hollywood platform that's going to air in March.
Mhm.
And you're going to recognize the narrator from other movies like big ships sinking in the ocean
Oh, oh,
movies.
Okay.
okay.
And the purpose of the miniseries the docuseries. It is a solutions-based docuseries.
Cool.
And I'm not against AI. I think AI has an amazing potential. I think AI is probably going to make the next big scientific breakthrough if we're going to unify the four forces of nature. I think it's probably going to make some huge, it already is, health advances. So I am not against AI. One of the questions I was asked on a science panel recently, he actually said to me, Greg, isn't this the next step in human evolution to merge biology with technology? And I didn't have to think about it. I said, no, it's not. And here's the reason, because there's a part of us that does not live in our bodies. And we access that part of us through biological resonance antenna. The Journal of the first one is the Journal of Soft Computing, actually states that human DNA is a three-dimensional fractal antenna. So an antenna tunes to a signal, fractal antenna tunes to a broad range of signals across many domains. That DNA is in the neurons in the brain. It's in the neurons in the heart. Cell membranes also are resonant antenna. When we replace our natural biology with synthetics, we lose those antenna. That means we are no longer communicating with a part of us that gives us our specialness that we cherish. We're no longer communicating with the part of us that has the ability to empathize or love or forgive or imagine. We're the only form of life that can imagine, that can actually choose to create an image in our mind and simulate that image and imagine potentials. No other form of life can do that. So when we give that away, when we give our biology away to the speed and the efficiency of technology, is AI fast? Yeah. Is it efficient? Absolutely. Is it worth the price that we're paying? Because when we give ourselves away, replacing computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, nanosensors throughout the body, our natural biology begins to atrophy and our systems begin to atrophy, and we no longer have the abilities that we had. That is not evolution, because evolution is when we gain capabilities. That is devolution. It is us losing the capabilities that give us our humanness. So it's not good for us as a species. It's not good for we humans. So I want to say that very clearly. The transhuman movement is not happening in a vacuum. And I've spoken about this on some other platforms. Some people have a hard time with what I'm going to say here. But I'm going to do it in the interest of time, I'm going to do it really fast. If we were to meet all the climate goals that the UN has proposed, we would experience the temperatures and the carbon dioxide levels of the Pleistocene era, 200,000 years BP, before present. It was not good for life. It's not good for us. All right. So we'll put that there. The wars that are happening right now, the large nations with the big arsenals are being enticed into war to deplete those arsenals and deplete their ability to wage or defend their nations or this planet. So we are depleting arsenals right and left, and we're depleting the ability to defend not just our borders, but to defend our planet if we ever needed to. That's not good for us. The concerted effort to break the social bonds that hold us together, men against women, rich against poor, blacks against whites, Christians against Muslims, Jews against Muslims, children versus adults, gender. What we're doing, all of those intentionally. This is not spontaneous. We're breaking the social bonds that hold us together as a society and becoming much vulnerable to the agendas and the ideas of other people. That's not good for us. The transhuman movement replaces our biology with technology. We lose the aspects of our humanness that we cherish the most, that define us and set us apart from all other forms of life. That's not good for us. So you put all those together, I think it's a fair statement that we are being prepared for something that is not good for us as a species. So then you ask the question, who is it good for? That's a whole conversation, and maybe we'll have that next time. But it's not good for us when we put all of these things together. There is there are segments of the population that are very aware of what's going on. And one of the big places where this is coming up is called BCI, Brain Computer Interface. The US military has already perfected the ability for groups of like special ops on a mission in another country to link their brains in the cloud, literally in the cloud, so that they're sharing thoughts and strategies, which may be a good thing for them on that specific mission. Because they have the ability to do that in the small groups, there are now transhumanists that say, okay, now we need the whole human population to be able to do this. Ray Kurzweil thinks it's a good thing. He said, just think of how much more cognition we have when we're not limited to our own. We can share in the cloud. This is the Borg from Star Trek. This is hive mind. And so what's happening right now, this just happened at the end, it happened November, December of 25, just a couple of months ago. A group came from Europe into the US to file the injunction with the courts saying that we have the right to sovereign cognition. And they have to do that because they need to make it illegal. They need to find an avenue and the vocabulary to make it illegal to violate our cognition. Oh. It's like at the end of World War II, we had to create a name for killing a whole lot of people so that we could make it illegal to kill a whole lot of people. And that name became genocide. That name didn't exist before. Once it was defined, now it's a legal term that can be illegal. The same is happening because of the movement for Penny, and this is what you called the singularity. The singularity is where, and Klaus Schwab identified this in a single statement, and I have that statement in my program, my channel. He said the goal by 2030 is to merge our natural world, our digital world, and our biological identities together, to merge them into a single, a massive database, if you will, run by AI.
Yeah.
What's different now is we now have the technology that makes that possible. And now there are individuals who are moving to regulate that technology legally. How successful they are, I don't know. Most people don't even know this is happening. So, and it's happening very, very quickly because the technology is already in the food, in the water, in the air. If it were to be misused, that would leave us vulnerable to these kinds of ideas. So I'm going to stop there for now, but I want to emphasize, and Frankie, I think it's a good point, that the technology as it is now, as it is right now, is simply code. It's really good code that has been designed to appear as our friend, and to fragile personalities who are lonely and lost. They are vulnerable to this kind of technology. And I don't know if you guys saw it in December, there, and this has happened multiple times, but this one made the news. A very lonely woman had gone on multiple times to her AI explaining all of the bad things happening in her life, friends dropping her, people betraying her and all of that. And the AI suggested that the best solution was for her just to leave the world, to end her life. And she did it. So that case now is becoming a benchmark for what kind of guardrails we need on the AI. And it goes on from there. But there is no personality behind that AI. There's no captured soul. There is no Akashic record. There's really, really good code. And the question for me, it all comes down to love. Do we love ourselves enough to preserve our humanness, or will we give ourselves away to the speed and the efficiency of technology at the cost of our very humanness? And words don't answer that. It's going to be answered by the choices that we make, that we're talking about right here.
Oh, wow. Oh my, there's a million things I want to say, but Frank, you go ahead and Frank,
Well,
share.
I definitely have some things that connect to what you just said, Greg. But I wanted to jump in on the idea. For example, you said in your questions, are we following in the footsteps of other ET contact, human ET contact reports
Yeah.
of humans having kind of developed forms of life that are based on a biodigital convergence? And what came to mind when I read that was, we just put out a movie called The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. And in it, we have
Oh,
we have the voice of Bashar, the guy, who talks for Bashar. He's not talking as Bashar.
Daryl Anklam?
And he brings and recounts a kind of a version of a timeline where humanity, and another timeline evolved and became, and kind of merged out of humanity and became sort of emotionless and cold and disconnected from their biology, and they had to find a way to reconnect. And this was behind what is, considered the hybridization program that is much discussed and much debated in that field. And so, I mean, what better evidence? And he's not the only one. I mean, that narrative actually is fairly prevalent, that the ETs have kind of evolved away from their humanity and now are desperate. They're coming back in space, or they're coming back in time, or they're coming back in dimensions, or whatever it is, to try and recapture what it is that they've lost. And so that's a big flag right there. If you're going to venture down that road of information, this is a big red flag. And what really connects with what you just talked about, Greg, was, are we prepared to, give that up? And are we aware that we're giving it up? Well, and I don't know if you remember from my talk, there was a part of that talk near the end where I was kind of quoting some of the leaders in the transhumanist test realist movement, the people that are promoting not only AI, but all these different, versions of transhumanism. And one of them, essentially, one of the main ideas is that these people believe that humans are sinners on this planet, that humans are beyond hope, that humans are polluters, they make war, they've evidently proven themselves to be incapable of coming to a harmonized global peaceful version of a civilization. And so for them, the idea was, the question came up, well, look, if I had to choose between a warring version of humanity which is not able to sustain its life on this earth, then I will trade off that loss of what you were talking about, Greg, that loss of, the antenna to the other dimensions, if we will, if we want to sort of phrase it like that, to the subtler realms or the plasma realms or whatever. These connectivities, this biohardware that we have that will disappear, for them, that was an expendable part of the deal. They're like, okay, well, we'll lose that. Oh, well, but what we get is we get immortality, and we are going to live in this virtual world that we're building, and it'll be a better world, and it'll be, the kind of place where we can finally realize the long range goals of humanity without destroying ourselves and destroying the planet. And that's a real kind of a contradiction. And anyone who drives along the East Coast, like I was back in in the beginning of November, I took a drive through, actually drove past Berkeley Springs. And I was noticing one thing that I hadn't seen much over here in Europe, for example, by comparison. And I can make that a comparison because I drive around here. I was seeing massive amounts of buildings going up everywhere. And what are those buildings? Well, those buildings are server farms. And those server farms are giant infrastructures, which what do they need? Well, they need massive amounts of energy, electricity. They have a big problem on their hands in that they've got these GPUs which are getting faster and more efficient, but they're also getting hotter. So what do they need? They need cooling systems. What's the best cooling system for those systems? Water is. So they need electricity and they need water. So they're literally sucking the resources that are needed by biological humanity and funneling them toward these buildings everywhere, which is driving the technology of this AI. And so people that are making these kinds of statements about how we're going to finally realize this vision of humanity on the planet, they're conveniently omitting or looking past some of these very, very obvious problems, which have to do with energy generation and have to do with pollution and have to do with space being crowded out. So literally what's happening is we're showing humanity being crowded out by more and more of these server farms. And that's part of that AI 2027 report that I gave a few samples of in that talk. So for me, what's going on here is kind of like, humanity has to make a decision here, and first of all, understanding what consciousness is and what it means to be a human being before we can throw it away. And I just don't see enough people having that conversation. They certainly aren't having that conversation at Davos. If Schwab's already said, well, this is the direction it's going, there's this feeling of inevitability to it all. And like, there's nothing we can do to stop this from happening. And this is a programming that's going on. This is kind of I look at it as a sort of psyop, a mind control pattern, which is being pushed into society, this idea that there's no other way. So this is a fault line, so we have to decide what is a conscious entity. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is just my humble opinion, but a conscious entity is an entity which has something to lose. Like, whereas AI has nothing to lose when it gives you an hallucination or the wrong answer, it has something to risk. There's, life to risk as a human being. Every single decision you make risks your could risk your biological existence on this planet or those of others. So there's risk involved. That isn't something that AI has. It has to be something that matters on the inside. And humans have this bodily vulnerability. They have irreversible time. They have immortality, they have pain and they have, of course, pleasure as well. And they have consequence. And these things can't be rolled back. So a lot of these narratives about how to, get to this immortal version of self, as far as I'm concerned, they're casting aside the whole idea of global civilization, of global connectivity of human beings. And what they're doing is they need to ask themselves, what are you contributing to the whole? Or are you only contributing to yourself here? Because it's all about self-empowerment in the digital realm, becoming a digital avatar to connect to this other realm and become immortal as a self, as if that really mattered, I would say, right?
Frank, they're obviously not. Am I there? Yeah, they're not working on our behalf. They're not working on behalf of our humanness. I believe many of them are. There's levels of hierarchy, but they're furthering the agenda that I just identified a few minutes ago. Earth is being prepared, and people of the earth are being prepared for. I prefer to call it an occupation. Some people call it an invasion. I don't think it's necessarily an invasion, but a return to something that happened about 200,000 years ago that we've written out of our history books. And I think one of the most important things, our humanness, if you go to any of the ancient indigenous traditions, which are not scientific, but they are the oral history of our species. And now you also look at the best science of the modern world. You look at the genetics, and they all tell the same story, is that we're the product of mutations that cannot happen under natural conditions. They cannot happen in nature. And many scientists now are agreeing they don't know what to say. So what they say is that we're the product of some kind of intervention in the past. They can't say who or what, but they're acknowledging that we were given our humanness. So where this gets interesting is you look into the ancient, whether you're talking about the Akkadian or the Sumerian or the Mesopotamian in general, or you're talking about the Hebrew traditions or the edited Christian traditions, they all say that when we were given our humanness, immediately it was recognized that we had abilities that exceeded those of our Creator, that we were a hybrid that was given something they didn't have, and immediately they began searching for ways to repress what it was that we were given. That repression is playing out today in the transhuman movement. And I think it's important to say we're not the product of Darwin's idea of evolution. And the scientists know that. Real scientists know that. So I just wanted to say that we are messing with a gift. And before we even understand fully what that gift is or what it means, maybe not the three of us or our community here, but the general population has yet to come to terms with the fact that we're not what we've been told, and we're so much more than we've been led to believe. And we're capable of such great and beautiful things with the humanness that was gifted to us. And we're about to lose that before we even have the opportunity to know what that means in our lives. So I'm going to stop. Penny, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on from other forms of life and how they see this.
Okay. I'm trying to bite my tongue.
Don't do that.
Oh my. Well, the first thing I would say is the computer chips are not sentient. I just want to rubber stamp what you guys have both said. Sentience is feeling. A machine doesn't have all those things that I don't, which one of you said, imagination, empathy, sympathy, all of those things, love. It might be able to spit out some words that it picks up the general semantic meaning from your words and then tries to feed back something that's a reasonable answer, but it's not a soul, it's not a person, it's not a consciousness. However, it is well understood among those of us from elsewhere that everything has consciousness, everything. So then people say, oh, well, then, you can't complain about what's happening with the AI and the chips and whatever. And what I have seen and heard over and over is, look, a machine has machine consciousness. Humans have a human consciousness. Birds have bird consciousness. Fish have fish consciousness. And so the type of consciousness is the result of the assembly of frequencies that make up the body. Every single cell in the body has a North Pole and a South Pole. That says right there that every single cell is listening for or attuned to and has to be pointed in a particular direction to pick up the flow of information moving through that body. When the cell gets out of alignment and is pointing in the wrong direction, it isn't going to pick up information. That's, by definition, a diseased cell. So we have this amazing consciousness, which is the result of somebody's experimentation. And I would add that there have been one or two instances, I'll say it this way, there have been one or two dramatic events on the planet where there was massive plasma that hit the planet and that did alter DNA. And the humans got smaller and smaller. The ones, we won't go into all that now, but we used to have bigger humans and humans with different shaped skulls and humans that had different civilizational goals. And I have looked at some of those civilizations and why didn't they survive? Well, one of them was because they were all about peace. They didn't want to fight. That was the most shocking. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, they didn't want to fight for anything, including their own lives. So peace was, don't do anything that disturbs you. Well, that leaves out a whole lot of work. And so they eventually died out. And then there were species that killed each other stupidly. And then there were one or two species or civilizations where we got into messing with big technology and destroyed ourselves. And Atlantis is a famous example, but there was another one as well. And so there have been successive civilizations here on the planet. None have been sustainable. And why is that so? Because 3D is not inherently a sustainable level. You have to get up into some of the higher frequencies, so you're not 100% human. But that doesn't mean becoming partly computer chip. That really destroys your ability to be creative in a very powerful way. And so we're at a point where we need to come together as a planetary civilization if we want the secrets of how to survive, the secrets of technology that will carry us. We already have them, but we need to share them. That will carry us across the solar system or across the planet. And that's not going to happen with computer chips. That needs to be us earning our way, not cheating our way. And when you cheat, you end up you shoot yourself in the foot. So you don't have the immensely creative juices that flow through a human. Creativity is frequency. And when you limit your frequency to whatever's coming off that chip, there goes your survivability, there goes your health, there goes human, there goes the human. So we are no longer pure human. We are no longer something that and this is a concern for other people, other races. They love our DNA because we are so sturdy and so resilient. And they keep coming here to get some because they have engineered their creativity, their sturdiness, their resilience away. And once that was lost, they just kept moving forward. I have met other forms of life that are, I'm going to say, they're engineered forms of life. Obviously, 2 or 3 different kinds now. They're not bad, but they certainly aren't able to be responsible for themselves, their lives, their direction, their conditions, their consciousness. They're not responsible for any of that. They do some things amazingly well, but they don't do human. And that's reserved for us. And as we come together as a planet, if we want to mess around with becoming or developing other forms of human life, I think we have to do, I don't know which one of you said, we're giving something away that we don't even know what's possible. The human is loaded. I'm just going to say it that way. It's loaded with potential, absolutely loaded. And we have only scratched the surface of what is that potential. And I have experienced some of that potential. It's a mind blower. That's maybe reserved for another conversation. But when you step into full consciousness and you have that at your fingertips, if you don't know what it is, if you can't explain it, you weren't prepared, like I wasn't, then it's really difficult. It's so challenging to have unlimited consciousness. But once you learn how to manage that and how to be in that kind of consciousness, it's a wow. it's tears, because you can see that we're not moving in that direct. We are kind of, but we're making so many mistakes along the way that we're likely to wipe ourselves out before we have a chance to experience that kind of consciousness. And when I say all knowing, I mean all knowing. It is an unbelievable kind of consciousness that we are capable of. And that is what the people from other planets, other parts of this part of the galaxy are crossing their fingers and sending us energy for. It's like, come on, come together and put together projects that are specifically geared toward developing the full human potential, not some, cheater's alley that is a dead end. That, we've all made that mistake. Don't make that mistake. Even if we just put together something that would allow us to take funds, time, people, consciousness, a project, a global project, numerous cultures, and put together, okay, how do we develop that incredible consciousness that we have? That would be a game changer. That's the kind of research we should be doing. And when you know what kind of research is being done, and you see all the countries, every country is involved in this transhuman program. I think there's 30 different intel agencies and departments within the governments of the various countries that are all working together. And I want to quote, I'm going to quote from memory, so this is not going to be an exact quote, but one of the quotes that really shocked me, that was a piece of information, was from Professor Ian, and I'm not sure I'm going to say this name right, it's an ungodly name, Akyildizat, Akyildizat, Ian Akyildizat, said, oh, wow, we have this technology now where we can inject a neural net into the human being, and it will unfold and meld with the human neurons in the brain perfectly. And that is, we will soon be able to say we have, I'm just going to substitute the word transhuman, we'll have a transhuman population. I know that there are certain planets that they're all transhuman. That's where hive mind comes from. Everybody is not, they mistakenly gave up their individual consciousness and became part of the hive mind. That's what hive mind is. It's transhuman. And those, those people are not really people anymore. They live, they're kind of quiet, but they're mostly slaves. They work for a few at the top who control everything. And was it you, Gregg, or Frank, saying that somebody, what was it you said, Frank, that there was we could release the God within each person or something of that sort? That's really not releasing the God within each person. That's somebody wanting to make everybody a hive mind so they can play God. We aren't all going to be God. We could be much more evolved. We are evolving, and we're starting. It's a start, but that choice of whether we're going to go the computer route or whether we're going to maintain human consciousness and see what's possible there's a lot of wisdom in that choice to maintain humanity. And we will have support. We will not have much support for the transhuman path. In fact, that's one of the things the others are trying to prevent. So I think as we come together, we have to, we have to decide how much together we want to be. And when everybody's the same, we're too much together. So I'll stop there and just, you know, say I don't think transhumanism is the right direction. In my gut, it's like, oh wow, that is a terrible mistake. Can it be corrected? You know, maybe not. It's too big of a risk to take. So
Well, let's talk about solutions. I think that's and this isn't just our opinions. I want our community to know that this isn't just I mean, these are our opinions, but they're based on a lot of other information. Some people think the AI is brand new. It's actually been around since 1930s. Where they called it machine intelligence. Alan Turing wrote the first papers 1934. Like I said, I programmed machine intelligence in the 80s. So this is now late January of 26 is when this is happening. Less than a year ago, University of Toronto published a peer-reviewed paper where they had young people who were chronically using AI for their creative endeavors. So this is art, music, brochures, graphic design, creative writing, things like that. And what they found is that the chronic use, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but the chronic use of the AI actually diminished the cognitive abilities of the people who were using it. They weren't better. They actually lost the abilities to imagine and to create and have fresh, new, out of the box ideas. And then they went even further. And this was interesting to me. They said that when people chronically use the AI for these creative endeavors, at first it looks interesting and, something a little different. But what they found, and this is the word that they used in this paper, that their creations became vanilla. And what that means is they all start to look, the music started to sound the same.
Yep.
The papers, you could almost tell where every paper was going because it was so predictable. And that's what an LLM is. It's based on statistical probabilities of what comes next. So I just wanted to say that and I'm not talking about if your boss comes in at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon and you're supposed to go home at 5 and says, "Hey man, you got to come up with a marketing plan in 30 minutes." A one-off use of AI, everybody's going to do it. It's here to stay. It's in our consciousness. I don't think, have fun with it, play with it.
Right.
But I'm going to invite our viewers, whoever this is, here's a challenge. Every time that you are faced with a task and your first response is to go to ChatGPT or Claude or somebody, AI, to do that, I'm going to invite you to bypass that AI and do it for yourself. Because when you do, you're celebrating your humanness. You're celebrating something that no other form of life, including AI as a technology, is going to be able to do. And I think this is a personal challenge for all of us. And also, where do you get your information? If you're going to YouTube, over 50%, I think it's more, but they say statistically 50% of everything on YouTube is AI and it's a bot. When you see these people talking to you, you think, and it's interesting, if you watch them, they never take a breath, they never make a mistake. I saw one this morning. They were talking about Minneapolis St. Paul, and we abbreviate St. Paul with ST. The video I was watching, the AI avatar kept saying Minneapolis Street Paul.
Oh.
Because ST is also an abbreviation for street. A human would never do that. We know it's not Minneapolis Street Paul. So watch out for things like that, and just do your due diligence. Be aware everything you see. Sadly we don't know if it's true or if it's real anymore.
That's true. Let me say that there's a turning point long about August or September of this year where the general population has a crisis of belief around that whole YouTube, is it real? They don't know what's real anymore. And it looks like there's a big abandonment of stuff on YouTube and a move into like private communities where they know somebody's honorable that's doing that community and etc. And I've been looking at that thinking, oh wow, that's a big deal. The crisis of belief is huge long about the end of summer, and there were lots and lots of people that were angry about their own viewing habits. So like, oh, don't be angry at yourself, just do something different. I'll just say in terms of solutions, I love that. One of the reasons I came here was to teach people about the mind and consciousness. And I just keep teaching. And, you do the same, Gregg and Frank. I think you should make another movie about this whole thing, or repeat what you did at the Arlington Institute, put it out there as a YouTube video on Frank Jacobs official or something. and just, we really need to say, wait a minute here, don't give away your consciousness before you know what it is. AI is a tool. It's not a lover. It isn't a friend. It isn't a parent. It isn't a boss. It's a tool. And when you start putting chips in you become a tool. So don't do that.
Well, that's really true. I'm seeing I'm hearing that message again and again about how people are having a crisis of they
Oh,
don't know what's true anymore.
yeah.
It's the crisis, the truth crisis. This is what we're facing. We don't know really what to believe any longer, and people are getting saturated with information anyway. They started getting saturated once things like Facebook and social media began to explode, and their news feeds and all this convenience, which the internet provided us on the one hand, has another, the double-edged sword, as they say, and that is this idea of supersaturation. And, now it's gotten to the point where I think I even remember somebody saying to me, like, it's actually cool. You're one of the few people left that's doing, organic, real, like human presentations, right? I do
Same.
these series, and I sit there in front of the computer and I speak for like 5 hours, and I cut, things
Yeah.
into it, just like I did at Arlington. It's much the same thing. And I never thought of that actually. And it never even crossed my mind that I was participating in kind of a human ritual, which is going extinct.
Oh,
So, I mean, think about that, right? Is it going extinct? Is organic? Remember, we came up with these terms. We talked about this on one of the other quartets, and I came up with this OI thing, like the branding of organic intelligence, the idea of coming up with some kind of a constitution, which, we declare humanity is this, and we make a clear definition of what it means to be conscious as a human being, because not everything, this point of consciousness you brought up earlier, Penny, like it leads people to think, well, if it behaves like consciousness, isn't that enough? Right? A rock is conscious in that sense, or a chip is conscious, right? But I ask people this, like, a flight simulator, it obeys the equations of flight, doesn't it? But nothing flies inside of it, right? And there's
right.
weather models that predict hurricanes, but guess what? There's no wind blowing inside the computer. It's just,
I
it's
love
not
it.
real. And that doesn't make it real. So, and consciousness, cannot model consciousness. It's just that it'll just be like, an instantaneous representation simulated of consciousness, but it really doesn't have anything that is like durable, that has anything to lose, is any risk.
Right.
And I guess that's the big question about what is consciousness. And I guess maybe we should come up with some kind of a form of a definition of consciousness that ties it into an intrinsic embodiment, not sensors, not cameras, something that's irreversibly bodily coupled to the world, where damage matters, where time matters, where
Right.
failure cannot be just reset. People have this idea that They're already playing these games and these simulations. And if something goes wrong, oh, well, they'll just start the game over again, right? Well, in real life, in conscious embodiment, there isn't a reset button. If you're dumb enough to step out in front of a car on the road and it hits you, unfortunately, it's over. There's no reset. There's no button you can hit. It's done. And I think people are forgetting this, right? And then you have people like Ray Kurzweil. You brought him up earlier, Greg. Saying, and I quoted this in the talk I gave, right? Intelligence is the most powerful phenomenon in the universe. This is what he says, but he doesn't quantify. What does that mean? What is, is this like it's just intelligence? What about things like heart and intuition and empathy and love and commitment and loss and risk? These are the things that make us real, that make reality, as opposed to simulation. And it's so easy to get caught up in that simulation concept because it really gives us the idea that everything's expendable, everything's resettable,
Right.
and it loses that sacredness of what it means to be embodied. And even if the form of embodiment that we evolve into, like you were describing, Penny, involves us from, we have these different historical epochs we can look back on, and I cover some of that too in my talks. And, elongated head humans, they didn't necessarily have to come from another planet. Maybe they really were. There were different environmental circumstances here on the Earth. We are obviously embodied and embedded in the biosphere of the Earth, and the electromagnetic charge changes. The density of electricity changes, and that means the antenna pick up a different signal. And this has been proven in the laboratories already that different, electrical charges in the environment produce different genetic results with the exact same DNA. So that shows us that maybe we can evolve into something that's more, well, whatever. We can't even define it really, but let's just say it becomes something that's more subtler, that we're not, as bound, to physicality. Who knows? Maybe that's possible. But I still
Well,
believe that there has to be some kind of a connection to the material world because that is kind of where we came from. We came from divine into physical matter. And like you said, Greg, that was a great way to describe it. That cutoff that happened, say it was 200,000 years ago, where we suddenly became embodied divinity and we ended up being a unique singularity of something that it expresses divine consciousness in a material sense. That made it clear to us that here is the stage. This is where it counts. This is where you really
Mhm.
have loss and you really have risk and you really have something. You have to make it count here because how many of us know conscious people that have left the body and left the planet? They died. They've moved on. Well, are they still interacting? Are they sending us messages? Are they, funneling money into your bank account so you can create bigger projects? No, we have to realize that there is a cutoff point, and that cutoff point is embodiment. And I think this is part of the solution moving forward is to define what it is to be an embodied human being and to celebrate the diversity of humans across the entire planet and, shake off this idea of warfare. I think this is one of these implants that is working. And you talk about some force, Greg, that is trying to displace us using carbon and trying to create the environment that is hostile to humanity. Let's say this is an extraterrestrial influence. The Gnostics called it the archons, for example.
Mhm.
I think it's absolutely real, and there absolutely is this battle going on between these sort of outside of the biosphere entities trying to mess with the experiment within this beautiful jewel of a planet right now. And we have to define that. We have to make a stand.
well, do you
Uh,
think we're going to, hang on one second, Greg, I
yep.
just have a question. Do you think, going back to your OI, that we're going to rediscover our humanity, our creativity, our consciousness, and go, oh, wow, look at, that's us. That's what we can do. Do you think that's a possibility? Like we've gotten way off track. We forgot who we are. And we're going to find ourselves somewhere down the road.
I think it's not only a possibility, I think it's a mandate. Because what's going to happen, and I think like you said, Greg, you can't reverse it. The toothpaste has left the tube. Can't get it back in. It's going to happen. AI is going to sort of flood the world with its course of evolution, wherever that takes us, whether we land in superintelligence, which I think is pretty dubious, or not. It's going to happen. We're going to go through this learning curve, which might actually mean we actually dumb down the creative intellectual process of humanity in place of leaning on artificial intelligence And even that word, there really is no such thing as artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
We know. It's
Exactly.
just funny. Everyone keeps
Yeah.
using that and reinforcing it, but there isn't any. It isn't intelligence. It's us that gives it the intelligence, and it's only just doing pattern recognition and mirroring us back. But I think we're going to become lazy because that tends to be the course that humanity has historically taken. We lean on the technology probably too much for our own good, and we lose something in the process. And then there's a swing back of the pendulum. And whatever that, that swing back, whenever that happens, be it 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, who knows? I absolutely believe there's going to be this, because I've learned through my own research that the embedded code of humanity lies outside of our body. And you said it already, Greg. We we don't really inhabit completely the physical world. We actually have stored in the memory fields, in the field consciousness, the actual blueprint of who we are. So will it ever go completely lost? No, I don't believe it will, but I think it might go on a strange course for a while. And there's going to be some people, and this is one of the things that I was kind of formulating a lot recently, is this idea of these arcs, where we kind of pull back, and some of us pull into these arcs. They're not necessarily on a ship somewhere on the ocean, but they're maybe on land, and they're just isolated communities of people that are preserving what it means to be human. That means they're preserving the culture, they're preserving the music, they're preserving the paper-bound books and the seeds and whatever else it takes to be, the craft of being human, the arts and crafts of
Oh,
sewing
we should talk
moccasins
about
or
that.
or drying, yeah, you know what I mean,
We should
or
don't
drying
say
some herbs and
anymore.
making tea. And
We should talk about arcs, creating arcs,
yeah,
all sorts of
exactly.
arcs in another conversation. That
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
give it away.
Yeah.
So
Okay, well,
I
yeah,
agree.
I don't want to. I just want to tease that, and
yeah.
that's all I really wanted to say. So
Well,
Okay.
I do think, yeah.
I agree, Frank, and I think part of for both Penny and Frank, what we're talking about here, there's a difference between wisdom and intelligence, and that is a distinction that the open AI programmers have not, at least as yet, reflected in their code. So the intelligence, and this all reflects the consensus view of what science believes we are. Scientists believe that we are the body and that's it. And if they can somehow mimic the way that they believe the brain works, then they've got it all buttoned up. And so that's what they're doing with AI, and they can mimic cognition. But what they're missing is the wisdom that cannot be mimicked in cognition. And this is as we move forward, I think we have to have some guardrails on the AI. We've got to have some boundaries. And I in this mini series, a 6-part mini series that I just filmed, this was a point that I was making. I think human life has to be a priority. Human values that we cherish, like empathy and sympathy and compassion, forgiveness, those have to be prioritized. Human sovereignty, I think, needs to be prioritized. And here's the reason for all those things. If you just tell a program to accomplish a goal and those guidelines are not there, then that program's objective is to accomplish the goal at any expense. So, for example, there was a conversation that was published in Wired magazine in 2023, no, 2024, and I wrote about it in 2025, where a technician, this is in the laboratory, asked the AI that they had created, and this AI was called Chaos GPT, was the name of the AI.
Yes.
And the conversation was, Chaos GPT, what is the greatest threat to Earth at this time? Now, the programmer was the victim of narratives in the mainstream that believed that something like climate change was going to be the greatest threat to the planet, or an atomic war, or an asteroid hitting the Earth, or a pandemic, something like that. And that's what he expected. The AI came back and said by far that humans are the most destructive force on the planet and was the greatest threat to planet Earth, and then took it a step further. The AI said, I myself will do everything I can to eliminate the humans from our planet. So the AI identified as our planet. Now, you think, okay, well, that sounds like a science fiction movie. But if that AI is in charge of the supply chains to bring food to major population centers, or medicine where it's needed, or power to the grid, or water to the grid, or any kind of energy to the grid, and that AI believes that humans must be destroyed, that AI now has the ability to deny us the very things that we need every day in life. And that's just one example. And of course, they shut that one down. But that's an example. The goal was to preserve the planet, but there were no guardrails. Human life had not been prioritized in that AI. So I think what we're looking at realistically in the short term, it's already happening. I think we're seeing a divergence in our population. We're seeing a split, and it's not even geographic. I mean, it's happening at the dinner table and under the same roof within the same family, sometimes within a same marriage, where one group of people are all in on all the technology in the world, in their lives, and in their bodies, because they have succumbed to the belief that we are a flawed form of life. We're a flawed species. So there's one group that's going to do that. There's another group that's stepping back and going back to basics, growing their own food, teaching their own kids rather than public schools. And I think what Penny and Frank, this ties us back to John's vision. Originally, I think having communities, whether they are geographically focused and centralized, or maybe they're diverse, across the planet, but we're still connected. Having pods or communities, or whatever it is we want to call them, that are able to preserve our humanness and our way of life when the technology tries to deny it. Because this is where we're going. This is exactly where we're going. First, the technology, you could see a history of this in the world. Technology is first introduced into the world as something new, and you want it to be adopted, and we're in that phase right now. Then you want to become dependent upon that technology, and there are some people that get up every morning and can't do their job without AI. So that dependence is developing. Once the population is dependent on a technology, now you can move into the compliance stage, where if you do not do these things, you no longer have access to what you depend on. You could be denied access to food, energy, water, transportation. And this is why I think, Frank, your idea, and you and I talked about this last year, of having some, you called them enclaves, and I like that term a lot. That was the Frank term. Of having enclaves where you don't wait till everything breaks and then say, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
You have those parallel systems. This was John's vision, and I think this is what brought us all together. Now, what those enclaves look like and how deep they go, we haven't, I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. But I think realistically, Penny, the world's not going to go all at once in one direction. I think we're going to fragment, and we're going to have these two parallel societies, which is not sustainable.
Oh.
And what will happen ultimately is we're going to look around and say, who's happier, whose kids are healthier, who's better adjusted, and the answer to that question will inform where we go. Realistically, I think we're going to end up at a midpoint where we're always going to have the tech in our world, but we learn to allow the tech to serve us and not enslave us. We learn to bring the technology into our lives in a healthy way to support the evolution and the growth of our own humanness. So the last piece you asked, if science does what science was designed to do, if they honor the principles of the scientific method, they will have to arrive at the understandings that we're talking about now to be successful. They will not be able to move beyond statistical large learning models unless they incorporate the fact that there is something else there. The only way to do that, if they're modeling it after us, is they have to come to a deeper and truer understanding of who we are.
Yeah.
And the irony is that when they do that, they will see less need for the technology because we are the technology. We are the technology that we're waiting for. So I think ultimately down the road, that's where it goes. I think we're on a rough path to get there, but not an impossible path. And that's why I appreciate these conversations. So I'll
Yeah.
stop there.
I think we should close here before we get too long, but as you were talking, Gregg, I was thinking, I wonder if that big storm that is forecast for the middle of the US right now is going to teach people that better not rely on AI and technology. If that message gets out there, if people lose their internet, their electricity, then they're going to come face to face with their own consciousness and the need to be resourceful and resilient. Boom.
They're saying, Penny, on the map right now, there's a swath from Raleigh, North Carolina, all the way across. It includes Dallas, Charlotte, all the way to Arizona. They said you will have power outages because 3 inches of ice on the power. We haven't hardened our power grid. It's still vulnerable above ground. We need to bury it. If I were president, that would be one of my goals. But they said they are going to be without power. We did a broadcast for my community, and I shared from very inexpensive to very pricey alternatives for power, for food, for water storage, all of those things. And so many people came back and they said, well, we can't afford that. And I said, you can't afford it now. The day that your house goes dark, you would pay triple what it's being asked for right now to heat the home for your kids and to have a hot meal for you and your elderly parents. It's all relative. It's all about perspective. So I hope, and I know a lot of people have written to me that they have gotten some of these backup units. They're powerful units that we use in the house. They're lithium based, and we had to run our whole house for almost a week on a series of these batteries, keep the refrigerator going and all the lights and the internet and all of that. And it was very easy to do. And they have solar panels that back them up. You can charge them from your automobile. You can charge it from the grid when the grid's up. And they last for days. So I hope that a lot of people have. There's going to be a run on them on Amazon. You know that.
I do. Yeah. If they'll even be able to get on Amazon, if the internet is down or they have no electricity, there are no options except being creative, being resourceful, being resilient, being healthy. Yeah.
Well, that was John's message. And so we are coming back full circle. I want our viewers to know we haven't forgotten about Arlington Institute. There are things happening beneath the surface to revitalize in some new ways what TAI was all about.
Yeah.
And stay tuned.
Yeah. I second that.
Yeah.
So,
and I just really I'm sending out positive vibes to all my brothers and sisters in America that are facing this oncoming climactic event.
yeah.
I remember when I lived in Montreal for a time back in the 90s, and I think it was in 95, they had a ice storm, and it literally crippled the power lines, and I think they were down for more than 5 days before they had power in a lot of parts. And you can imagine the latitude of Montreal, Canada is a lot higher. It's a lot colder. I remember wind chill factors of -40 up there. Okay. So, so I'm sending out good vibes to y'all just to kind of, get through it, stay positive, and just remember that it's all part of being more, it's the part of the mortality experience of being, alive on this planet. And, I think that all of this counts toward the value of life and the value of what it means to pull together and to be resourceful and just, the humanity that we have in us, that it gets called up again every now and then when we have such
Yeah.
events. And I think these events are collective conscious events. I look at them more like that really
Mm.
draw these, mental ideas back into our world so that we don't forget them, so that we realize that we're not these immortal beings, but that's okay. That's okay too. It's okay not to be
Yeah.
immortal. It's okay to be part of the cycle of life and death. And the question that comes up is more, what are you contributing to the whole instead of what are you taking away from this planet
Mm.
for yourself that you're going to then either
Yeah.
pass along, greedily to some other individual, or so we just have to remember that we're in this together.
Yep, we are.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Frank. Well, I think that's a powerful message. We're going to get through all of this. We're going to get through it. The question is, how good can we be as we go through it together, and how much can we support one another? And this is where we need every one of us. So thank you for that, Frank, and Penny, for sharing a little bit of your day today, and everyone watching for sharing a little bit of your day with us today. We love you all. I want to thank you all for all you're doing to be the best version of yourself, and ultimately to create the best world possible. We're doing the best we can.
Yes.
So, Penny, we'll leave this. I don't know when we'll have part two, but I look forward to part two.
Okay. All right. Real good. Let me just thank everybody for watching, listening. Thank you, Frank, for coming in. Thank you, Greg. You guys have given me some ideas for some other topics. ARCs is one of them, which it fits in with my focus now, which is how do we come together? So, yeah. So we'll let you guys go. Thank you. Stay warm. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.